Hello everyone, and welcome back to DMG. SSDs are just a fact of life now. In fact, it's gotten to the point where it would probably be easier to find a computer with an SSD than to find one that doesn't have one. After all, SSDs have just taken off massively since their introduction to the consumer market about 15 years ago. They've increased massively in speed and capacity while dropping in physical size and, of course, price. SSDs were ludicrously expensive when they first came out, like a couple $100 for a double-digit gigabyte drive. However, what's much less commonly known is that SSDs have been around for a lot longer, and what I have for you today is really the first implementation of an SSD for a computer as we know it today. This is the SanDisk FlashDrive 3.5, or rather 3.5 flash drive as it is branded. It is a 64 megabyte IDE SSD from 1999, almost 10 years before SSDs in the 2.5 inch form factor, SATA, all of that stuff really came to the market. And well, this is certainly a fascinating little known piece of hardware. I should mention that really the first SSD was made in 1992 by SanDisk. It was a weird card that went in an IBM ThinkPad, but my definition of SSD as we know it today is, well, this is just IDE. You could plug this into pretty much any computer made in the late 80s through mid 2000s, and it would work just fine. It's universally compatible, just like a modern SSD would be. You can stick this in place of pretty much any hard drive out there. It doesn't have some weird proprietary interface. It doesn't even use SCSI. It's just IDE. So without any further ado, well, let's take a look at this because, well, I came across this by accident. I didn't even know this was a thing. Now, first of all, let's talk about the name, that being flash drive. Of course, nowadays we use that word to mean usually a little USB stick, a small, compact, of course, flash storage-based drive, probably used to move small amounts of data, but this is the first reference I can see of that word, flash drive. So I do suppose that SanDisk actually coined the term as a brand name, that being flash drive in one word for their SSDs specifically. So that is an interesting piece of history. Now, secondly, we see it's got a huge metal case, but there doesn't seem to be much to it. I mean, there's just one board in there, it's not very thick, and if you look in the case, it doesn't look like there's much going on inside, so I haven't really looked at this yet, so I'll open it up soon and see what's going on there. But there's also not much on the back. It's an oddly bare-seeming board. Now, let's talk about the capacity. It's 64 megabytes. That's not a lot. In fact, even in 1999, that was not a lot. Computers typically had 64 or a little more megabytes of RAM. So in terms of storage space, that's really not all that much. 64 megabytes then is kind of what 8 gigabytes is now. It's passable, but you're really not gonna get much out of it, like in terms of RAM size at least. Well, 64 megabytes looks absolutely huge when you put it in contrast with how many floppy disks, 3.5 inch double-side, double-density it would take to make 64 megabytes. However, when you compare that to the actual size of this drive, because once you format it in Windows, it's only about 55 megabytes, so we can take a couple floppies off. That's still a formidable stack, though. Are you not impressed? Well, this is how many 720K disks it would take to make 64 megabytes. I think there's about 100 in here, because some of those are even 360K, but all of these are 1.4 megabytes. Okay, I'm done with all that. In truth, this is a hard drive from 1993, and not a particularly high-end one. It's 341 megabytes, and it's from over half a decade earlier. So, just some things to put it in perspective with. Also, a CD, just a single CD, is between 600 and 700 megabytes. So that's 9 to 10 more of these it would take. So clearly the point of this drive existing is not as a higher capacity solution. And to be fair, SSDs have always kind of been that way. I doubt it's for speed, because even in the 2000s, a good hard drive, like a super high-end, like 10,000 RPM drive, was about as fast as the early SSDs in terms of sequential reads and writes. So I can't imagine a 1999 SSD is going to be very good. I think the reason this exists is for reliability, and that's a huge advantage of SSDs, always has been. Because, well, hard drives, especially from 30-something years ago, like this one, they're very sensitive to vibration, and, there's a lot going on in here, and if I shake it around too much, no more data. So, my theory is that this exists for industrial applications where this drive is going to get shaken around, it's going to get, vibrated, it'll get bonked around. But in those environments, you typically don't even need to store that much data. Like perhaps it's operating some sort of terrifying bone-crushing machine, God knows what. But really all it needs to do is just boot DOS, just run an application that runs the machine. But the thing's vibrating so much that if you put a hard drive on it, it'd die in like 2 hours. So that's my theory of why this exists. Industrial applications where a hard drive just wouldn't survive. Dust could also be a concern, but really it's just the vibration. Because after all, flash storage is really resilient. But speaking of flash storage, I don't even know what's in this yet. So let's go ahead and take this apart, because I'm really interested as well. Okay, so it looks like there's just 4 screws on the bottom, and well, that's exceptionally easy to get into, isn't it? I expected this to be a bit more chunky, I feel like. I thought it would have a bit more substance, but it was actually pretty surprising. Granted, it's very heavy, but it's, it's a pretty small thing overall. Oh, by the way, I am going to test it. So, whatever's in here, I hope I don't break it. Pretty good at not breaking things, though. Anyway, let's see. What is inside you? Really funny shaped board. And of course the inside is that just weird shiny metal that was inside a lot of old computers. Like for example, the rails on this hard drive use it too. Let's set that cover aside and let's... What the hell? Whoa, that's not what I was expecting. So if you don't know what's going on here, this is a... Is that just like a PCMCIA card? Is that all this? Yes! Yes! That's so weird. Okay, so this is a PCMCIA card. You might have seen them on old laptops, but they were originally conceived as a storage medium, mainly for digital cameras. You can get both solid-state drives, which SanDisk was a huge manufacturer of PCMCIA solid-state drives, or you could actually get a spinning hard drive for PCMCIA. So that means, technically, if you really wanted, you could put a spinning hard drive inside your SSD. But really all this is is an adapter from PCMCIA to IDE. And I feel like that makes this a lot less cool than what I thought this was going to be, but it also makes it a lot more useful, because theoretically, if this breaks, you can just put whatever drive you want in here. Like, you could put a 64 gigabyte in here, because a PCMCIA card is pin compatible with Compact Flash, which is pin compatible with IDE. So an IDE compatible CF card, I mean, it'll just work. There's no reason it wouldn't work. I mean, there's no logic on this board. All it is just some traces on a PCB. So I'll see if there's a way I can get this open without just smashing it to bits, because I really don't want to do that. So I was definitely expecting to find a board full of chips, not a smaller drive inside the drive. I should mention, SanDisk also made a 2.5 version of this flash drive, and, well, I suppose it's also just a small SSD in a box. Let's see. Oh, I think I can get the metal cover off. I mean, this is kind of going to break it, but it'll still work. Okay. So here is where the actual memory lies in here. Ooh. I wish there was a gentler way to do this, but there really isn't. Well, maybe if I take the other side off first. Wow, and the board in here is very bare as well. That's the weirdest thing. Oh my god. All this for 2 flash chips? Well, that's insane. Certainly not what I was expecting to find. So they only made these flash drives in up to 64 megabytes. But if that's 64, then that's 128. Then that's 256, and then that's another 128. So what's 256 plus 128? 384. They easily could have fit 384 megabytes worth of flash chips onto this board. So that's the weirdest thing. Why did they only make these in up to 64 megabytes? When you could have easily squeezed a lot more. No, there's even more. So that's 32 times 3, which is 96. So 384 plus 96, that's like 470. You could squeeze almost 500 megabytes onto this board. But they put, what, like a ninth of it in this huge-ass case? When it really, I mean, the whole thing could have fit into something like CPU size, like that big, if only the IDE interface wasn't so damn huge. At the same time, I'm really disappointed, but also really amused. I thought this would be way cooler, and there would be, like, some awesome stuff in here. But it's just a lame box with a camera storage card in it. Okay, so I will get this back into shape. Again, I wish there was a slightly less violent way to get this open. But you're also not supposed to get this open. I mean, there's supposed to be a, like, rugged card that's supposed to be able to take some bumps and jostles around in it. You know what? I'm not even gonna bother with it. Well, no, I do have to get the pins right. Okay, so there's our SSD, and we're going to go stick it in a computer and power it on and see what happens. Now, as I mentioned, a huge advantage of this thing is that it just uses IDE, which is like literally the most common connector in a 2000s computer. So we're just gonna stick it right here. I'll see if it shows up. It should list it as a disk if it works. Come on. Oh, SanDisk. Yep, it works. All right, let's switch over to the capture card and test this thing out. All right, well, here we go. We're on the desktop now. And I've got a nifty little application, HD Tune Pro. Now, I have plugged this into the computer to make sure it worked, because as I mentioned earlier, I saw that it showed up as 55 megabytes. Whoa! Now, how'd that happen? Because earlier when I plugged it in, it said... What the hell? This thing is so weird. So earlier when I plugged it in, I've got a picture of it. It says 55 megabytes. Well, anyway. Well, no. First I should do the tests. Alright, here we go. I'm expecting greatness. Maybe I shouldn't have been. One megabyte per second, everyone. Oh, that's not the right thing. What is it? Yes, it's you. Okay, so I ran tests on that 341 megabyte hard drive that I showed earlier, and I mean, it's spinning hard drive. 42? No, it's 3600 RPM. It's 3600 RPM. A spinning hard drive from 1993, and it still beats the SSD in write speed. Or sorry, read speed. Oh wow. Those are some good access times though. 2-ish milliseconds? That's wonderful. So that is absolutely fantastic. That's about what you could expect from an SSD. I mean, even a modern one. As you can see, the hard drive does severely fall behind in access time, as hard drives tend to. Yeah, wow, so this is great, and the burst rate is just torturing the drive, so we're gonna stop doing that. No, it doesn't have any features. It just not, wow. So it does have a buffer. It has kind of like a DRAM cache. That is hilarious. Okay, 512 byte sectors, so pretty much that means any data size copied to it that's over 512 megabytes is going to be slow as hell. Sorry, not 512 megabytes. I meant 512 bytes. And let's test that theory out. Yeah, its 512 byte speed is really fast. Well, actually 4 kilobytes isn't the worst I've seen. I bet 64K... Well, okay. I mean, 50, that's not the worst. 1 megabyte is gonna suck. I mean, all old drives struggle with 1 megabyte. Here we can see... Ooh, yeah, so it gets almost 10 times the seek performance of that old hard drive. 29... Yeah, I mean, it gets about 10 times on the 512. About, what, like 8-ish? Like 7, 8 times on the 4K. And 64K, well, I'll wait for it to finish. So, a little disappointing in the speeds, but after all, it's basically a camera card. Oh my god, it's barely faster than the hard drive. That's insane. 52 milliseconds. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Yeah, and it'll take 3 years to finish the 1 megabyte per second. Or sorry, Not the 1 megabyte per second, the 1 megabyte. Also, if you haven't seen my other channel where I play all of these games, definitely go check it out. It's linked. Shameless plug. I love playing weird old games. But wow, I'm kind of disappointed. I paid like $50 for this thing because I thought it was the coolest thing ever, and it's a really bad drive. Oh. I mean, not the worst I've seen. I think I have one drive that's slower than this, and that is the compact flash card spinning hard drive that I made a video on a while ago, but this is just completely miserable. We'll be here for like the next 4 years. So I guess that really does put it into perspective of how far we've come in terms of SSD. Holy crap, is that an 800 millisecond access time? Great, we have access times of over a second? That's insane. I've never seen an access time over a second. In fact, let me go benchmark a hard drive really quickly. Ooh, there you are. I'm gonna log into my server and benchmark a hard drive and kind of show you what that looks like. Let's see, there you are. So I have some consumer grade laptop hard drives in here, but yeah, this is a 10,000 RPM hard drive here, and I think it's from like early 2000s. It's doing just fine. In fact, is that better than the SSD? Ignore that right there. I'm a good girl, I promise. Oh, no. The SSD is better than the hard drive until you get to 64K, and then it's just a slaughter fest for the SSD. I bet I could do every single test in this suite on this hard drive before the SSD finishes the 1 megabyte. 47, yeah, it starts to slow down at 1 megabyte. Okay, we know what that's like. Let's switch over to an almost completely full 5400 RPM laptop hard drive. Oh my god, and it's still doing fine. Yeah, not the best look for 1999 SSD here. Well, these graphs do well to highlight one thing, and that is consistency in SSD performance. You see, there's a physical curvature to the platter of hard drives, and on the inside, the sectors are closer together, therefore easier for the head to jump between. So we can see, yeah, there's a slope to the graph of the hard drive. As it fills up, it gets slower because the data is pushed towards the outside of the platter, where the sectors, they're further apart, basically. But on the SSD, it's a completely flat line, with just a few outliers in all of our data sets. Even all the way to the end. So that's fantastic. And that always kind of has been one of the advantages of SSDs. Also, yeah, I mean, this hard drive is considerably slower than the first one that I showed you, but the SSD still, slaughters it in the 512 and 4K. But once you start getting into the 64K, well, that's just the weakness of this SSD. Again, 64 kilobytes is kind of a non-insignificant portion of this whole drive's space compared to a 1 terabyte. But anyway, there we go. Yeah, it's a really bad drive. So moral of the story is don't buy an SSD from 1999, I guess. Okay, last thing I'm gonna do, I have a 4 gigabyte SanDisk compact flash card and a compact flash to PCMCIA adapter, also from SanDisk, and I use this as a secondary storage drive in my Windows 98 laptop. So I am going to try and take the 64 megabyte disk out of this drive and put in the 4 gigabyte. I don't see any reason why this wouldn't work, in fact. I mean, it's weird adapterception, but let's see if it comes up here as an ATA storage device. Yep, it does. Came up as the SanDisk drive. And again, it's not recognizing any logic on the actual board itself. The big board that takes up most of the case is literally just an adapter to convert from one connector to the other. Okay, yeah, there it is. You can just put any compact flash card you want in here in a PCMCIA adapter. No, there's nothing on it. I have a feeling that this card is faster. It's a lot newer. Yeah, there it is, 4 gig card. Wonderful. Yeah, and it is eons faster. Just ludicrous amounts more rapid than the 64 megabyte disk. So that's an interesting application for this drive. And I'm probably never going to look at this 64 megabyte drive again. I'll take the SSD out of the case, and I'll probably put something newer and faster in there. And I'll use it to be like a retro SSD, kind of, but with a more modern flash solution inside it. Just a newer compact flash card adapter. And that's a really interesting thing. Because again, they made them also in 2.5 inch form factor for laptops. Yeah, really weird thing. I'll run the sequential benchmark for you. Again, just so you can get an idea. Yeah, about 15 megabytes per second, which, to be fair, is what it claims on the front of the compact flash card. It proudly proclaims, hey, I can do 15 megabytes per second. But that's going to wrap it up for the weird old SSD saga. So that's absolutely not what I was expecting, but in a way it's even more intriguing because it just raises more questions. So thank you everyone for watching. As always, I'm glad to add another weird thing to the collection. That's what I love doing, just buying weird stuff. So thank you everyone who's supported me, thank you everyone who's watching, and I hope you'll come back next time.